Right, so if we thought Donald Trump was already losing control of the war with Iran, nothing quite nails that on than it managing to spill over even more borders, and in this case the US is now back in Iraq, it seems, but perhaps not for very long. The United States Embassy compound in Baghdad has been struck. The embassy has told American citizens to leave Iraq immediately after repeated attacks, and Iran has answered the war on Israel's side of the map with one of its hardest barrages yet, including the first reported wartime use of the Sejjil missile, and a wave that Iranian state reporting also says used Khorramshahr, Kheybar, Qadr and Emad missiles. So they are now delving into the newer and heavier munitions as the defense systems of their opponents run out of juice, just as every credible commentator on the military goings-on in the Middle East predicted would happen. So Donald Trump's wartime sales pitch has now bitten the dust. This was supposed to look like pressure working, wasn't it? Deterrence being restored, enemies being cowed into submission. All the usual epithets and rubbish that gets dragged out every time Washington and Benjamin Netanyahu, be it the real version of him or the six-fingered AI version of him, decided that dropping more explosives on more people is somehow a sign of control. Instead, Trump has got Baghdad under strike pressure, Israelis under alerts again, and a public leave now warning from Baghdad sitting there in black and white where everyone can see it now. Trump chose to back an expanding war on Iran. Netanyahu chose to keep widening the field while Gaza was still being pulverized and Lebanon is still being hit, even more so now than ever before. And they both chose to act as though the region would simply absorb whatever they threw at it, and then politely line up afterwards to say thank you to them. It was always stupid. You can imagine the adulation already going along in Trump's brain like one of those cymbal-clapping monkeys. But now it is as stupid, and it sounds that stupid, in public too. When an embassy compound is struck in Baghdad and the official answer is not swagger but a warning to your own citizens to get out by land, mind, because commercial flights are no longer available either to get them out. You're no longer advertising anything like being in control of this situation, are you? You're advertising just how exposed you've made yourselves and your own people. You're telling the world that Iraq is not some neat little side note anymore, not some comfortable bit of the geographic map sitting under American supervision, but another place where the cost of this war with Iran are landing on US-linked infrastructure and on the people who trusted American force projection to keep the roads open. And just to hammer home even more how out of control the situation is in Iraq now, there's a clip going around showing a disconcerting lack of US air defences, in fact. The footage allegedly having been taken by an Iranian drone, literally moving very, very freely over the Victoria base in Baghdad. This is near Baghdad Airport, again reinforcing why air travel might not be available, because US forces simply don't appear to be in control of this area anymore. Now, as interesting as that clip is, I'm not going to pretend that clip proves more than it does because the footage is clearly edited. The exact location I've not been able to confirm from that video alone, and wartime rubbish does spread fast online. But the reason that clip is travelling around social media at all is obvious enough in and of itself. Iraq is now producing the kind of images people associate with an active war front, not a quiet rear area under American control. And that sits very neatly beside the harder reporting that's already on the record about those repeated drone incidents around Baghdad-linked facilities and the embassy telling Americans to now leave. Iran has also not behaved the way these people wanted. The whole point of the opening blows from Washington and Tel Aviv was to make Iran look cornered and disorganized and increasingly unable to answer in a way that changed the political picture here. Instead, Iranian barrages have kept coming. Israeli alerts have kept sounding. The force level has gone up instead of down. Iranian state reporting says the 54th wave now of what they're calling True Promise 4 includes the Sejjil missile for the first time since this war began, alongside heavier systems including the Khorramshahr missile, which has double warheads. Now this matters because most people hear missile and they think one tube with a bang on the end. Job done. But these are not all doing the same job. The Sejjil is a two-stage solid-fuel medium-range ballistic missile with a reported range of about 2,000 kilometers. The solid-fuel part is the important bit here because solid-fuel systems can be stored and moved and fired a lot faster than the older liquid-fuel missiles that need more preparation before launch that Iran has mostly been using for all of this time so far. So in plain English, that means less warning, less faffing about on the launch site, and a harder job for anybody trying to catch this thing before it's away. The Khorramshahr is different again. Similar range to the Sejjil, but it's a much heavier liquid fuel system still, associated with a very large payload though. And if Iranian reporting about double warheads is accurate, then that points to a missile built not just to reach Israel, but to hit a lot harder and complicate interception all at the same time. So this is not just another night of more of the same. This is Iran showing that it still has escalation room here right now. It is only now breaking out the heavier tools it still has available and is willing to move up the ladder rather than down it. Israeli media, again, according to that same reporting, had sirens sounding in Tel Aviv and Herzliya and at least 141 other locations last night. So when people keep trying to talk about controlled escalation, they are asking you to ignore the very obvious fact that the side supposed to be folding is still able to put large parts of Israel under warning at scale, with faster launch solid fuel missiles at that, and with even heavier payloads now. Benjamin Netanyahu has his own problems attached to that, and it's not a small one, is it? He's the man who keeps selling forces a cure. More bombing, more punishment, more fronts, more threats, more order, more swagger. That's his formula. That's what he's always done. Yet the visible result is not a region settling down under his iron grip, because that is a bad joke even by his standards now. The visible result is that Israel is still taking very heavy missile fire, even more of it, all as Israeli air defences are placed under even more strain, and according to reporting, that is saying their interceptor stocks are now running dangerously low. All at the same time, Iran is only now opening the package on its harder stuff, and the military burden is being pushed harder at the exact moment he also wants Lebanon battered into obedience as well, and Gaza still treated as a permanent killing field. He keeps on opening up more fronts. If you keep opening more fronts while the state you're trying to break is still landing strikes, ever increasingly heavier strikes at that, and your own interceptor story is becoming a matter of public reporting, along with an increasing shortage of offensive weapons too, because you're fighting three fronts at once, you're not imposing order, you're burning through stock and your political cover all at the same time. And you seem to think the US will just wave a magic wand over this and make it all right, even though they're running out of the same stocks too. Iraq matters here particularly because of that history with the US, that state, because Iraq kills the old presentation dead on arrival. Gaza has been under sustained Israeli assault for so long now that a lot of Western coverage has basically stopped covering it entirely, even though a genocide is still very much being enacted. Lebanon gets treated as another separate border problem that doesn't quite get the same attention that Iran does, even though it's another front basically in the same escalation, another round of northern tension. No, Iran and Israel get packaged as the big strategic event, don't they? As if the rest of these fronts are just supporting caste. But Baghdad ruins that notion, that tidy little filing system, because Baghdad is understood instantly by Western audiences, isn't it? This is the place where American power is supposed to have history, leverage and infrastructure as the bases, the allies, the memory. People hear Baghdad and they hear occupation and embassy walls, the green zone, troops, militias, victory over Saddam Hussein, never mind the rise of ISIS afterwards, let's not talk about that bit, but all of that. So when the embassy is hit and Americans are told to leave now, that old claim of US superiority here, it dies a death, doesn't it? That actually turns out to be another consequence of that US-driven Iran-Israel clash. Every claim of might makes right, of total victory, of winning on day one, it all collapses and falls apart. And that drone footage seems to just rubber stamp that fact. The Lebanese Health Ministry has now put the death toll from Israeli strikes in Lebanon since the start of this phase at least 850 now, with over 2,000 wounded. But that's just supporting cast, we're supposed to be told, as far as the MSM coverage goes. Reporting's also carried attacks on medical facilities and ambulance centres and paramedics. Well, of course they have. That's what they always go for, isn't it? And they're not tiny side details. This matters. They're part of the same war picture. Netanyahu's coalition has wanted Gaza-level methods normalised outside Gaza for a long time, and every new strike in Lebanon moves that ugliness further along. So Iraq's not the first proof that the fire would not stay where Washington and Tel Aviv wanted it. Iraq is simply the proof that the fire can no longer be opined away with the usual diplomatic wash and newsroom deodorant. Gaza sits underneath all of that because that's where the moral centre of the whole thing has been from the start. Because Netanyahu's government has spent months teaching itself that mass civilian destruction carries no meaningful penalty if the right allies keep giving them cover. Once a government learns that lesson, it doesn't become more careful, does it? It becomes more ambitious. And that's what we're seeing now. That's how you get officials in Israel talking in open menace about Lebanon, about Gazifying it, about seizing everything south of the Litani now, bombing tents on the beaches near Beirut. That's how you get wider displacement orders treated as administration. That's how you get the word evacuation used as though it's a kindly service instead of a threat carried out by aircraft and artillery. Gaza has been the training ground for this political and military impunity, and anybody pretending Iraq can be understood without Gaza should be trying to spare the audience a chain of cause and consequence they'd rather we didn't connect the dots over. But the other thing this is stripped away is the pretense that America is standing outside the war as some sort of referee with a bigger whistle than everybody else. Donald Trump has said enough already to make the real ambition impossible to miss, regime change, which he increasingly cannot deliver. But it sits perfectly neatly beside a widening regional war because that's what regime change attempts always end up doing. They do not remain limited for convenience. They run through the neighbouring states, the allied bases, the oil routes, the embassy compounds, the civilian populations. They create a map full of exposure, and then they try to call that exposure necessity. Well, Trump can posture about that line all he likes, but a leave Iraq order after strikes on Baghdad's American compound is not the posture of a man sitting above the mess. It's the posture of a man whose war aims have now left his own people victims of it. Mainstream coverage is still doing that familiar bit of housekeeping where the connected events get cleaned up into separate updates, so responsibility never has to stay in the room for very long. Tel Aviv under alerts becomes a military development. Baghdad under strike pressure becomes a security concern. Lebanon's dead become a casualty line. Gaza gets pushed back into the usual background hum of permanent slaughter. The Strait of Hormuz turns up as a marketing story now. By the time they finish tidying up all the language, nobody powerful appears to have done anything, do they? Except react to circumstances seemingly beyond their control that they're still trying to tell us they're actually in control of. Trump backs the war, Netanyahu keeps on widening it, the region keeps taking the hit, the coverage keeps shaving the fingerprints off the sequence until it reads like a run of unfortunate set of events that nobody in particular started. Put the authors back into their own story, the picture gets very nasty very quickly though, doesn't it? Iran's still answering that. Israel is under heavy fire as a result. Iraq has now been placed under direct pressure. Lebanon is being hit all the more. Gaza is still being destroyed. And the American promise that bases and alliances and swagger would keep a lid on all of that has just produced more warnings, more strikes, more names on evacuation notices and security notices. Trump and Netanyahu have now got a war that no longer obeys their polite script that they'd written about this ahead of events. Baghdad is in the picture with Gaza and Lebanon, not hovering somewhere off to the side waiting to be filed into a later news story. And the public image attached to that is not one of command, but a strain. Embassy alerts, the land routes out, the sirens across Israel, the heavier Iranian systems now entering the fight. So all the old language about controlled escalation now sounds like what it always was. A sales line for people who thought violence would stay where they pointed it, as if they controlled everything, but they do not, and it has not. Trump's war has delivered wider exposure for the United States, harder pressure on Israel, more dead in Lebanon, more ruin in Gaza, and a Baghdad embassy telling Americans to get out. Swagger's not held the line. Bluff has not restored order, and the region is now answering back in the plainest terms there are. You widened the war, and now you're living with the map you made. So leave immediately. For more on the latest goings on in the Middle East right now, do stick with this channel as the place to go for the stuff the mainstream media won't tell you about, such as the Strait of Hormuz very much being open for business, actually, despite Trumpian claims to the contrary, now begging other nations to help him blow it open when it's only him being kept out. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Also do check out the new website that's now gone live, KernowDamo.store, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next one. Cheers, folks.